Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining me today. It was 12:12 when I sat down to do this reading, so we're starting right off the bat with a beautiful number synchronicity. I'm really excited to talk about what I want to share today. It's really interesting how this is unpacked for me, and it feels big. It feels really big to me. So it started for me I started feeling this new this shift, this thing that I'm going to talk about on Sunday. So today's Friday. I'll probably post this tonight. So it was Sunday, how many days ago that was. I woke up in the morning and I felt completely different. I felt like something had completely shifted. And we were having geomagnetic activity. We were having some storming, solar storming. And so I immediately thought, okay, this is connected to the solar energy. This is new information that's coming in. What I felt, and I did post about this on Facebook, so you may have seen it. I felt this real healing energy. It was very flowy, very watery, really feminine. But what's interesting is rather than feeling like the energy, it was an energy that was coming in, because at first I was like, oh, this is a real divine feminine energy, and there's this divine feminine energy coming in. What was different is that I wasn't feeling it like I was being infused with it. I was feeling it as if I was it. It was like affecting the way I moved, the level of safety that I felt in my body, in my nervous system, in my level of connection and perception. I felt merged with all that is. I felt like I just felt very, very, very safe to be in my feminine energy. And so it took me a while to unpack this, so there are lots of sort of things and synchronicities that happen. So I'm telling this a little bit out of order. But what I realized in the end was that it wasn't feminine energy that was coming in. It was divine masculine energy that I was feeling. And that's why I was feeling so safe to be embodied and to be in my body. So I don't know if other people were feeling this or tracked this energy the way I did, but I do feel, because of all the other synchronicities that I'm going to talk about, that this is very much in the energy right now, this divine masculine energy, landing, showing up, fleshing out, rising, returning, this type of thing. And so and again, I'm going to tell this, these synchronicities a little bit out of order because I feel guided to go to this other piece. What I realized in the end, I was like, oh my gosh. So I had a session with a man the day before, the Saturday before. And so I haven't really had a session with a man who was coming because he was jumping through thresholds and like ready for that next level of himself, and maybe ever. To be honest, I don't think that's true. That's not true. But it's been a while. It's been a while. It's certainly not since I have, because I've been expanding and evolving in this work. So it hasn't happened since I've had my last couple up levels in this. I have worked with men. I had a man come in recently. He's a massage therapist, and he wanted help with his shoulder. But it was so that he could like get back into the grind. And we've done lots of sessions before, so over the years. So I was kind of like, okay, well, this isn't just going to be about like tending to the shoulder. We're going to go on all the different levels, and of course the shoulder's about those levels, and it may go away and it may not, depending on what the higher lesson is around the shoulder. So we had this deep thing. He's very galactic, so it was a full session, but his intention was back into the grind. Then I had two other men who came because their girlfriends wanted them to. And it's like they were still, we still had full sessions, but it's just really different when somebody is coming in. And that's what I said in the reading that I shared, not the reading, the video that I shared about the energy work that I do, that this work is really the fullest potential of this work. It can help with all kinds of things. It can help with body pain. It can help with, emotional stuff. It can help stabilize. It can help with all these things. But the fullest expression where it can really shine and go the whole way is when somebody is jumping through those thresholds and ready to embody a different version of themselves. Another way we could say it is they're going through the ego death. They're going through the dark nights of the soul and the shadow work, and have peeled off those layers and are needing some assistance in integrating and anchoring and clearing. Okay. And so that's where this man was. And there were a lot of really kind of amazing synchronicities of how he was guided to come to me specifically. So it just felt like so sacred and so profound. The other thing that happens in sessions when somebody's really been doing that that work, or are coming to this work because of that work, right? Not to say that those other people weren't doing shadow work and stuff like that too, but where you're at this point where your higher self is guiding you, okay, now it's time to converge, is that there's a lot of collective work that gets done between us. Because when you're jumping through levels and thresholds within yourself, you're working collective energies. Okay, so what came up in that session with that man was this. It's like we got to the core wound of humanity, one of the core wounds of humanity, and for the masculine collective within us, within all of us, and then also in terms of gender, physical bodies, but then also in terms of polarities and energies just in the world at large, and the energies and frequencies running on our planet, like we were talking about last time, the magnetic and the electrical, these energies, right? The polarities of masculine and feminine, wherever they land, fractals of the same thing, okay? So that core wound, and I may go into that later if I'm guided to, but for now, just to say that. And it really unpacked. We saw it really clearly. We talked about it. We found the right words, and then it cleared. And as it was clearing, I found myself guided to dedicate that clearing. I often do this when I feel collective energy in a session. I just bring it into awareness that it's collective as well, and then dedicate it out. So it was like, may all men benefit from this. I just got chills. May the masculine energy within all of us benefit from this. And so both, we're two or more gather, both he and I, this consciousness and our higher guides and higher selves and all this in that moment, and I felt that ripple. Of course, we were in the quantum space. So it wasn't like a real cognitive, like, wow, look at what just happened. We were just in it. We were just moving energy and ping ponging and identifying and clearing and moving and all of this. And so it just sort of hit me later. And in fact, like a week later, like I just made this connection like yesterday. I think it was yesterday, because it was in the forest. Is that when I made it? Or I made it at the river the day before. But anyway, I was out in nature and I was like, okay, I see what this is. And not saying that he and I were solely responsible for the return of this masculine holding energy, but I feel there was something that was going on that was inviting, or there was a shift or a node point. Maybe it has to do with, I read something briefly, I don't know anything about it, but a square with Mars and a bunch of different planets, Pluto and Uranus and all that, Mars being our masculine. I don't know, but I feel certain that there's a confluence of events that were creating a huge clearing of the masculine energy, of the wounded masculine energy, that just sort of got petrified and like hopelessness, like a kind of, and this goes far back, not saying that that's might not be the energy that any of us are necessarily feeling, but at the core, there's this calcification of this wound and this trauma that can create tendrils of despondency, hopelessness, like inadequacy, feelings of directionlessness, spiritual narcolepsy. That's what came up. Remember at the end of that last reading, if you saw it. And so anyway, this huge clearing with that. And then realizing that it was the next day that I felt this safety with my feminine energy, as if that release, of course, that's how I experienced it in my hologram and my personal journey. Other people experiencing it, or not experiencing it, but I feel that there are fractals of this everywhere, and I've seen many of them. Okay, so, and which I'm going to talk about, but anyway, having some level of shift or indication of shift in the masculine energy, something drastic. It could be the opposite polarity as well. So let me think about what wants to be talked about next. Okay, let me jump to this. So Monday morning, I woke up and I was at my son's house. So every Sunday I go down to the desert in the middle of nowhere where my son lives, and I stay overnight, and I stay all day Monday, and he and I connect and talk, and we garden and we eat food together, and I get to decompress from, I'm in a small town, but I'm very energetically sensitive. So it's really good for me to go in the desert where there are hardly any people, hardly any magnetic or electromagnetic or frequency stuff interfering. And it just helps me reset, but there's also something that my son and I seem to be doing right now. Okay. And so I woke up in the morning on Monday, and what I heard, and it was in relation to him, I heard, you are his home. And then they clarified, compass, North Star. And the download that I got from that was that my energy, my feminine energy, my alignment, my mother, not mother even as specific, like I am your mother. It's the feminine energy. The mother energy was serving as a homing device for him, right? And so my son and I, we have had a lot of, his dad and I were at war for a very long time. A lot of you know this because you've been listening to me, or you know me and know my story personally from me telling you. But and so the kids, got in the middle of that, and my son aligned with my ex-husband. And so it was very subtle in that it was all a fractal of the division of the polarities and the sexes. So my ex-husband really embodied that sort of rational, linear. He's a very spiritual man, but it's science. It's yoga science, and there's a system, and there's one way, and this and that, and everything fits in its little place. And it's like and then for me, very intuitive. I'm painting a picture, and I'm circular, and I'm pulling from a lot of different things, and then but he would kind of attach to like the word I was using, right? And then it would become an argument, and this type of thing. And so there were these two different energies that both of my kids grew up in, and they were very different, and they were sort of battling each other. Okay, so they both aligned where they aligned. My daughter aligned with the sort of intuitive, heart-based, mystical, feminine way. My son with the masculine. Okay, and so but my son was very intuitive and very sensitive when he was young. He'd pick up on energies. He'd feel the vibration of stones. He was very empathic. He'd be like, Mama, why did that man make that face? Like the man's eyebrow, like furrowed, like a tiny little, eighth of a centimeter. And my son would catch it. He was like that. And yet the world was really hard for him because of that. And so he would kind of, spiral out into, overstimulation and become this little wild child and all this. So he was a challenging kid, right? Eventually, when I lost custody, he got really shut down to all his sensitivities. Okay, he got really shut down, and the only direction he had was his dad's program, right? And so recently, over the last, what's interesting is this all kind of started 9 months ago, which is so crazy because that's the gestation period, right? And now it's kind of birthing. There's this birthing of the energy. The reason why I'm going into all of this is because my son has always been, not always, but I'd say the last decade, up to a decade, has been sort of an indicator of the collective masculine energy for me, because our families are such a fractal of the warring and the distortion in our world. It's like we're really working those collectives. My son has been like the birthing of the masculine type of radar for me, and so I've been watching this over the years, and then having other synchronicities with other men, blah, blah, blah. It's part of how reading the patterns. It's how I get information about collective energies. And so anyway, so the last 9 months, he's been really pulling back his energy and setting boundaries against anything that's not him. He's been in isolation out in the desert. And for a while it was like, oh, poor Kaya, he's just out, and he has no this and he has no that. But it's like, it's perfect for his journey, because it's like, he's really come into his own essence without any outer conditioning or outer programming, other than, what he picked up from me and his dad, from our own distortions and stuff like that. But so anyway, he's really been cutting all of that out. He used to work on the ranch, and, he'd work with the men, but he was like the little boy, he was learning like physical things. He was learning how to build stuff and learning gardening and all these things and stuff like that. But the last couple years, he's just been really alone. And he kind of had this huge ego death, and it was a little rough for a while. But what happened for him is he hooked up with his true essence. So now he's running his true essence. And all of a sudden, my son and I are not all of a sudden, it's been, like I said, it's been building, definitely the last 9 months, but there were signs of it before that as well. Where he and I are really, really aligned. It's like we're sharing from the same channel, right? Because when you hook up with your divinity and your unique energetic signature, you get into that telepathic field with everybody else. You might all be talking from different angles, but your but you're tapping into the same, the same telepathic network, the same truth, truth is truth. So he and I sit now and we talk for hours and hours and hours, and he'll be talking about like gardening and, like the magic of plants. He's like this wild botanist, so he'll be talking about in a very scientific way, all these different things, the different elements in the soil and the water and all these details. And he has this photographic memory, and and I'm just sitting there like, holy crap, but then he'll relate it to spiritual principles, and he'll talk about it, in this very magical way, where he's like, it's like music, it's like you're a conductor and you're working with all these different elements. So that's my language, the symbols. So then I'll bring in my version of this, of my version of all that is. And we're just like weaving and weaving and weaving. I remember one morning I was drinking, I don't drink caffeine. I quit coffee a long time ago. But I had this, and I drink like a tea. I drink all these Ayurvedic powders and mushrooms and all these things. But I forgot, I ran out of powder. So I was like, oh, I'll drink some of this coffee. It was decaf coffee. And we were so high off our conversation, I thought that there was caffeine in the coffee, but it wasn't. It was decaf, but it was just, I got like so, we got so into it. So this has been going on and building more and more and more and more and more. And so, so again, reading that in terms of so my son right now is probably the most divine masculine that in my life or that I've ever met, because he's really, really, and a lot of that is because of the isolation. He hasn't had a whole lot of conditioning. He wasn't in school for very long, that type of thing. And he's just been out there in the desert, and it's like the in the desert, you can't remember your name, that kind of thing. It's like there's something about all that vastness and all that emptiness that just connects you in, and so anyway, it's really special. It's also really special for me personally because I was very worried about him for a very long time, because he was, I worried he was going to be the sociopath, because it's like he was just, like I said, when he would get overstimulated. And I was kind of similar, I would get overstimulated by energies and then just like disconnect, like sort of disassociate and spin out into this manic state where you're just freaking crazy, just till you learn how to ground. That's another thing that was really good for me in that way as well. So anyway, all this with this masculine energy, and noticing this with my son. So my son and I are working the polarities in this way. I've mentioned this before. I'm Capricorn, he's Cancer. So we have this polarity in terms of a feminine with a masculine sign and a masculine with a feminine sign, energetic signature through his elements that's how I like to think of it, like the elements that we run through our physical vessel in relation to when we were born and where the planets were, right? So it's the energetic elemental composition that we have and that we run. So anyway, him being very watery, me being very earthy, that's another polarity that we have. And then of course, female avatar, male avatar. So it's like we're just anchoring all this energy together. And so that reminder, and a friend of mine was talking about this the other day too, because she was feeling into all of this. And it was like, when you're working the polarities and you're grounding energies between the masculine and the feminine currents, it's not always relational. It's not always sexual. In fact, a lot of the time it isn't, right? We think that the merging of these polarities, we think of it in terms of relationship and sexuality, but it's any place that the currents match and are on that level where they can anchor and create and ground together. And so my son and I doing this work, doing this polarity work together, and it's really, 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 really interesting. Okay, so noticing that, and so let's see. There are other things, but I'm trying to think what wants to come through next. Let me move into the cards. There's a lot more, but I'm gonna let them kind of structure this for me. Oh, interesting. So skunk spirit, know your worth. Well, this is really interesting because this is a lot connected to that core wound with the masculine. And so a lot of our masculine energy, and again, this is whether you're a man or a woman, because we all have both polarities within us, right? So, but the masculine energy in our world, when it's not in proper polarities, this is what I was talking about with my son and I working these polarities together. If it's not in proper polarity within you, it can feel really lost. It's like without that North Star, you might have if you're a man, you might have a woman in your life that's kind of like a North Star type of energy that represents to you what's true and good and aligned. Or if you are a woman, you know, you might be that for yourself. Or if you're a man, you might be that for yourself as well, you know, where you're leaning towards your intuition and you're taking action on it and all of this. But if you're not, there can be real self-worth issues, because the only thing you have to go on then is the program. So you're looking outside of yourself to figure out what to do, because you're not looking inside of yourself. You're not listening. And of course, the men have it really hard. The males have it really hard, because they were conditioned, like my son, he was conditioned away from his sensitivity. You know, there was no room for it when he wasn't living with me. He had to man up, and he had to, you know, but he lost that part of himself. It got locked away and, you know, shut in this little door over here that he's just unpacking now. And that's a lot he's been talking about, you know, he'll say, as an intuitive man, you know, he's reclaiming that aspect of himself, and he's honoring it. He's really good at honoring flow and reading energy and not taking action until the time is right. And if there's nothing going on, then he's okay sitting in the void. And he's, you know, it's like, oh, it's so good. It's just so good. And so, but at any rate, you know, when you aren't able to do that, all you have is the program. And when you're sitting in the void or nothing's happening, you jump into that masculine energy, but without the guidance of your soul, and you start creating things or making things happen, or you start chasing things, or, you know, getting the next job, or getting the next woman, or getting the next, you know, whatever accomplishment or title or whatever, you know, chasing this external worthiness, this external validation, so that you can be impressive and you can feel worthy, right? Okay, and so a lot of that going on for the men in our world, but also for the women as well, because this whole world has been masculinized. You know, the feminine energy has been outcast. Of course, it's easier for women in that way, in that specific way. We have more. I remember a man, actually, he lived down at the ranch and was one of the workers with my son, and he would say, you know, he confessed to me once, he's like, women, you can, this was his perspective, he's like, you can say anything you want, and you can get away with it. And he's like, I have to monitor everything that I say. I have to monitor what I say, and I have to be really calculating, and I have to be really careful. And, you know, so that was his reality, you know, wherever he got that from. He was kind of ex-military and that type of thing. And, you know, and I would always kind of encourage him to just, you know, let it out. Like, it's okay. It's like, at least it's okay here. But anyway, so that kind of thing. And so, yeah. And I forget what I was saying. Let me move on. Oh yes. The whole world being masculinized, right? The patriarchal realm. So even feminism, a lot of women feel like they have to be like men in order to be respected, right? Or like, I want to be able to, for me, like, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to do a masculine job. I don't want to have the right to go to war or be a police officer or any of that. I want to be honored for my feminine gifts. To me, that's real feminism, is honoring what's inherently feminine. You know, I mean, it's like, of course, everybody should be able to do whatever they want, because we all have different compositions of masculine and feminine within us. And a more masculine woman is going to want to be able to be who she is in the world. But for me, that, you know, then it kind of went the opposite way, where then women that were more feminine, or that didn't want to be out in the world, or wanted to do more, you know, healing or home tending or beautifying work, were kind of looked down on even by women, right? Like, it's all gotten messed up. And so at any rate, you know, these kind of issues, I know a lot of us know this, but it's just coming out. It's just what's coming out, right? And finding, because when we're not connecting to our feminine energy, to our soul, this is what I'm always talking about, to our guidance, we're not connecting to our divinity. If we're not connecting to our divinity, we're not connecting to our soul. We're not connecting to what is truly worthy and valuable about us. We're finding our worthiness in the outer world, which is just based on, well, now we know it's just based on lies and inversions and enslavements and all these things. But even before this, you know, decades ago, when most people didn't know that, we were, you know, finding our fulfillment in the outer world, right? And a lot of people, especially very feminine people, men and women, feeling lacking and feeling inferior and feeling worthless if they weren't drawn to or really good at functioning in the world in what's been defined as masculinity, right? And so this whole turning, finding your worth within your soul nature, turning towards your soul nature. Okay, so let me pull another one here. Yeah, a huge There's this card is a 9, so there's this sort of like perseverance type of like coming to completion, keep going type of energy. So I feel like there's this real invitation in the energy. I don't even know if it's just an invitation. It's almost like a directive for the masculine energy in ourselves and in the world to turn towards the feminine. There's this harmonization, this like almost like a magnetism that's happening. And this is what we were talking about last time, when for those of us that are uniting our polarities, we're becoming very magnetic because we're not leaking our energy, so we're pulling things to us. I feel like there's a that God fractal energy, there's enough people in that energy creating that magnetism that the rest of the like wandering particles in the realm are being pulled. They're being pulled towards that fractal, towards that energetic alignment, which is pulling them towards their feminine energy, towards the feminine energy. So that's happening within us. It's happening within us or within them. It's also a pull towards that which is coherent and integral. It's like structured water, right? Let me see what this card is. Oh, interesting. The King of Pentacles. Yeah, there's the King of Pentacles. There's that divine masculine energy in the earth realm. Now, this can be both. This can be the masculine that really has all his castles and he has all his money and he has all his cars and all his businesses and all his things, but he's completely devoid of a soul life. Or it can be the one that's come in and is manifesting and creating in the physical based on the guidance of his soul. And that's the true divine masculine expression of this card, the King of Pentacles. Okay, so a huge soul call to return to the feminine within yourself. You might also, if you're a masculine, if you have, yeah, exactly. Okay, I'll get to this in a sec. This is leading me exactly where I wanted to say. Hold on a sec. Yeah, so this call, this magnetism to the feminine energy, it would be the feminine, if you're a man, the feminine energy within you, but it would also be the feminine energy, whoever or whatever represents that. So again, divine feminine energy is both. Divine feminine energy is a female body with her feminine and her masculine energy intact. It's that yin yang inside of her. That's what makes divine feminine energy. And divine masculine energy is a masculine who has his feminine and his masculine energy intact. So it's the yin yang within him. And what's interesting is whenever in the sessions, in that session as well, whenever there's a clearing of that wound, that core wound that keeps you in impotency is the word that I want to say, but that might be offensive to some men. I don't mean it that literally, but just immobility, unable to move, like you just don't know which direction to go. And so that's what this is, the Five of Swords. This is where you're afraid to get hurt or to hurt, and you're way up in your head, and you're planning things and you're like, well, I can't do this because of this and this and this and this. And it's that when you're so what it actually is it's indicating an ego death and a resistance to the ego death. And so when you're in resistance to the ego death, you fear the feminine energy because it's the feminine energy that takes you into the void. It's the feminine energy within you or in the world or in your partner that takes you into the unknown. It's the feminine energy that you can't control. It's the feminine energy that you don't necessarily understand or have the plan for. It's like the Fool card came up in the last two readings. You take a step and then the step appears, but you have to be willing to kind of step off that cliff, right? And it's really scary, to step off that cliff. And so that's that energy of fear, that masculine energy in all of us that's just like, but I don't know. I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I can do this thing that I'm being guided to do because it might not, might not work out, and then I might lose this, or, I might run out of money, or I might lose this relationship, or I might, and so then you don't do anything. There's that immobilization because you're afraid to take action because you don't want to hurt somebody, or you don't want to get hurt yourself, and it freezes you. It's like that fight or flight where you can't fight or flight or freeze, right? You can't move, or you're fighting out here to try to make something happen, or you're running. And that's the other thing you're running. And so a lot of the masculine energy in this, when it's being called back home, again, like my son being called back home, it can run, it can turn around and run, because it has that battle. I don't want to hurt, and I don't want to get hurt, and I don't know what to do, and I want to go towards it, but I can't, and I want to go towards it and I can't. So I'm just going to run, and I'm going to shut it out. But what's interesting is, so this leads me to the next synchronicity. So I had this thing, it happened 5 or 6 times in the last 2 days. It's where I'm driving and somebody does a U-turn right in front of me. And every time it's right in front of me and I have to stop. And so the first 2 times this happened, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. This happened twice now. Like, that's interesting. But then it happened like 3 or 4 more times the next day, where I'm like, what the hell is going on? And it's just this, like, if you watch it just in an energy sense, it's like, either direction, it's like you're going this way and then you're like, nope. And you go back this way and you just turn around, or you're going this way, nope. And then everybody kind of, in my case, I had to wait. I had to witness it. I had to watch it and notice, whoa, what is this pattern? You're going this way and you turn around. So it has the energy of that, like, I'm going towards this, but I can't, I'm scared, and then you just turn around and run the other way. You turn around and run the other way. But the thing is that there's a current to this. This is collective energies. This is energy that's moving. It's like the masculine energy in us is being pulled towards the feminine. So it's really interesting in that last reading where I was talking about the magnetism and the magnet and the pull and the electric that has to keep recreating itself and puffing itself up. And it's like, I think this last influx that we had of solar energy really infused something that's making it harder to resist the truth of reality. That's how I would say it, because again, it's the soul and it's our feminine energy and it's our intuition that connects us to what's true. It connects us to our divinity. It connects us to what we need to do to walk our sacred path, to contribute to the building and the anchoring of the true new, but actually the true reality, right? And so there's just this kind of inevitability to it. It's getting stronger and stronger and stronger. Okay, so some men, some masculines, whether it's within us or without, are effortlessly turning towards it, and some are resisting. Some are really resisting, and some are resisting a little bit, right? But so that's the thing. It's like it's like all the waters run to the ocean. You can't get away from it. There's a current. You can turn around and you can swim up current, and you can get your, but eventually you're going to get tired. And when you get tired and you take a breath, guess what's going to happen? You're going to, just like that U-turn, it's going to take you down again. You're going to eventually go to the ocean. You can fight it for as long as you want, but it's going to take you there. And I feel like that's what a lot of us are finding. And so about a month ago, so right around the time that I was being guided to start offering the distance sessions, I was being called, my higher self was like bossing me around in these strange directions where it was like, go over here and do that. And I don't know if you were watching, you would have heard me talk about this. And I was just like, no, I don't want to, but I would have to, because it's like, I would try to resist. No, because what if, and blah, 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 blah. And then it would just keep coming, where I would eventually, because I've learned to surrender. That's like been the last, like several, probably 4, well, whole life, but the last 4 years has been about, surrendering, right? So I've learned that, like, just like, if you try to resist and it doesn't work, then just give in and do it, so I've been doing that. But it was positioning me into all these certain situations. And some of those situations, because I was still in a little bit of this resistance energy, were catalysts. So they were catalysts, people that would, put something on me, maybe project something on me, or try to define my reality for me or something like that. And I would have to stand up and claim myself, claim my journey, claim my right to my process, claim my right to my intuition. And so it was strengthening me. My life, my higher self was putting me in situations that were making me talk about and claim my version of reality and my journey, and my, including that video that I did about the sessions. So it's really interesting, right? If you are kind of in this resistance, your higher selves, our higher selves, the soul of the world, is calling us back home. Again, it's like how I was shown with my son. I am home to him, but the feminine energy, the mother, the capital M, is home to all of us, and she's calling us back home. And so we're hearing this call, and even if we are resisting, we're going to be redirected. So a lot of the masculine energy in us, or the men that might be running or might be trying to avoid or go in a different direction, they're going to go straight into the jaws of their own mirror, where there's going to be some catalyst that's going to make them face themselves, do some kind of alchemy, And then in that alchemy, they're going to be clearer. They're going to clear, and they're going to up level, and they're going to up level in frequency a little bit or a lot of it. Maybe they're going to need another one, but each time they do that, they're going to be more and more of a match to the frequency of their own soul and to the feminine energy in this world. And so one of the things that was coming through last week, I love this is coming up again, was that we are the stargates. We become the stargates when we have our polarities intact. And what's interesting is there's this sort of like built-in protection system, right? When you become a stargate, when you become a co-creator in this realm, because you've stopped the fight and you've surrendered and you're listening to your intuition, you're taking action on her, you're standing with her, you're doing everything she asks you to do, this kind of thing. Everything your intuition is asking you to do, you start to build and anchor this new true earth energy on this planet, knowing your worth, okay, this type of thing. When you start to do that, you become that stargate. Now, the stargates, what I was talking about last week, if you haven't seen that video, what I've learned from Indigo Angel is that the stargates, you can only access them because they're interdimensional portals, and that's where things come in and out through into this realm. Okay, reincarnation portals, but also interdimensionally the different races and stuff like that. And so, whoever controls the stargate controls the access point and the doors as they open, but it's controlled through frequency. You can only pass through if you're a match to the frequency. I had a dream probably like 10 years ago, and it's really interesting because there were huskies in the dream. They were like wolves, but they were domesticated. So they looked like huskies, but they were wolves. And I thought that was really interesting because the wolves are the pathfinders. They lead the way, they go first, this type of thing. So that's just sort of a side note. But in the dream, there was a spaceship. Okay, it was a spaceship, but now I understand it as a stargate or an interdimensional portal in the dream. I didn't know anything about any of that a decade ago. Or I may have, but not really. It might have just been something in passing and I didn't know what that was. So I didn't really know anything about it. And so there was this man, and often when I interface with galactic energies in my dreams, the person's eyes will be like a portal, and it terrifies me. It used to terrify me where, even if they're benevolent, it's like there's something about their eyes that's just like a portal into space, even though they have a physical form. And so there was one of these men, but he was very good. He was very good. There was this green ray. And so what he would do, if you wanted to go on the spaceship, I have a lot of like rocket ship dreams where I'm traveling in space. I don't know where I'm going, and it's kind of scary. But anyway, so I wanted to go, I guess. I was just in line. He would scan you with this green ray, and he would scan your system. And what I understand now is he would scan to see if you were a frequency match to the thing. And I think at that point, like I didn't have, something happened with the huskies and I had to go like chase the huskies. Like I clearly wasn't a match. I had to go do a side mission, this type of thing. I had to find my path, like my own path, before I could be at a frequency match to this portal thing. Anyway, so that was really interesting. It really relates to that energy. I'm understanding it now a decade later. That's the other thing about the masculine energy really wants to know, and it wants to know now. So it might go and it might do research, and or it might dig, or it might try to figure it out, and this type of thing. But the feminine energy tells you like, okay, I gave you a seed. Just hold that seed, just put it in your heart, put it somewhere, just keep it there, and like, whereas some things don't unpack until a decade later, but you allow those things to come in, knowing that they're coming in their perfect timing and they're coming in their perfect form, even if they're an incomplete transmission or an incomplete codex. It's like your DNA, and that happens a lot in sessions too, where I'll bring things through or I'll say something and people will be like, yeah, I looked that up and it didn't really mean anything. It was like, well, it wasn't for your linear mind. It was for your DNA. It was a flame letter. It was a codex. It was a packet of information that the part of you that it was connecting to absolutely understands. And the two of them are having a conversation behind the scenes that might not unpack for your conscious and linear mind for another 10 years or a week or a month or whatever, whatever it is. And so that kind of thing, but just that sort of differential as well, right? When the masculine is separated from the intuition and from that flow, he can really get in a head spin. And that's what this is too, that spiral. Okay. So the thing that I was talking about though, was the safeguard around the built-in protection when you have that fractal, because when you are that magnetic energy, and a lot of people are going to want to come and kind of like, wow, it's like a moth to a flame, right? Like they recognize the energetic signature of alignment, and they want to come, and they want to be a part of it. There can be a lot of vamping energy, a lot of and before we really get our polarities intact, when we still have those energy leaks, we can really leak our energy, leak our energy and become. I've been seeing that in a lot of the feminines. There's this new pattern that's showing, and it comes out the third eye, and it goes over to the right, and it's like almost like a feeding tube, where there's this siphoning that happens off of the feminine intuition, off of her intel, her knowing, the energy that she's running, through her intuitive centers. It also connects down with the womb. And so, and sealing that off. So that's the pattern that's been clearing in the feminine, where it's like there's this sealing of energy going on within the feminine energy within us and the feminine collective in terms of the body, the physical body, where we're not leaking our energy anymore, which is facilitating the rising and the return of the masculine energy. Because, and it's not to make it like like an us and them, or oh gosh, it's so tricky, the language, because because again, just always remembering that we both have all these polarities within us, and it's just up to each of us individually to bring them together and to do that inner work. And until we do, we're all in the same soup, we're all in the same mess, we're all vamping, we're all leaking, we're all running, we're all striving and grasping, and it's the same soup, right? But you might see it more exaggerated depending on which gender you're in, depending on which composition of polarities, masculine and feminine, you have within your body. Okay, so just to clarify that, I'm not making this about men and women at all. Although it can be seen in that as well, it can be seen in that, but it's fractalized, it's fractal energy, so it can be seen everywhere as well. So I'm talking about the polarities and the energetics in general, but then at times giving examples through specifics, which can go through genders. Okay, so and now I completely forgot what I was gonna say, so I'm gonna move on. It'll come back. All right, so let's see what else. Okay, so the King of Wands. So there we go. That's another divine masculine energy. The King of Wands is spirit-led. He listens to his spirit and he takes action. So it's very interesting that we have these two kings on the other side of this Five of Swords. So I remember what I was going to say now. This very, very strong energy of this invitation, this energetics of the divine masculine energy. Okay, because when the feminine energy within us stops leaking, stops doubt, this can look like within an individual, not doubting yourself, not ignoring yourself when you're guided to take an action and you don't because you're afraid, right? Or you're worried about what people are going to think, or that it won't work out and then you'll lose all your money or your friends or whatever, right? Not ignoring yourself, not telling yourself that you're stupid if you don't have enough validation or whatever it is, just really, really aligning with yourself, being that masculine container, containing the energy of fear. When this thing comes up, the masculine energy surrounds that fear and says, I got you. I believe in you. I'm going to help you bring this forward. We're going to do this and we're going to handle whatever the consequences are. It's surrounding the fear. The fear is a program. The fear is a program. We've been programmed to doubt ourselves. We've been programmed to doubt our intuition, to turn on ourselves, to put others first, to leak our energy. We're afraid to set boundaries. We're afraid to say no because we don't want to be a bad person. We don't want people to not like us. We don't want to be rejected. We don't want to, all these things. And when we start to contain ourselves and we start to stand with ourselves, we not only become that fractal, but we become that magnetic where we're attractive to things that are coming in, but we're not allowing that feeding tube where things can vamp off of us or steal from us, and we're not falling into distortion in any way where we might leak some of our energy, or somebody makes us, kind of swoons us a little bit, or, like seduces us into giving them some of our energy, and we start leaking our energy because we have some unmet wound that allows us to do this, right? All of the ways that we're leaking when we're intact, we become that stargate. And so if somebody is coming around that isn't a match to the frequency, you're this, if they're not this yet, and they're in this kind of energy trying to take something or interfere or pull your energy, they're not going to be able to get in. It's like it's like in my dream, they're going to come, they're going to be scanned, and it's like access denied, that kind of thing, where they're going to be sent back into doing their own alchemy, So a lot of us, and now I am going to make this about gender because I know a lot of women have felt really rejected by the masculines in their lives because they just run off or they ghost them or they come towards and then, no, I can't. And, this type of energy, it's because they're not a match to what you're holding. They're not a match to what you're holding. And if you are leaking energy to them, then they're going to take that energy and then they're going to run off and go, get another woman with it, or go get a job with it, or go, feel good about themselves for a while, and that kind of thing, right? They're extracting, they're stealing your energy that you're accessing, and you're leaking it, and then it's draining you, and it's this thing. But so a lot of the feminine energy within us, or within the feminines, sealing that off so that there can't be any more extraction. When somebody comes around into your Stargate, into your field, they're going to bounce out. If they're trying to connect you telepathically or energetically, they're not going to be able to get in. They're not going to be able to secretly siphon off your energy in the dream space or in the astral or in this sort of like romantic higher timeline thing that a lot of us feel, and a lot of these people, it's counterpart energy, but it's the dance of the polarities where the task is to unify within, right? And we've all, like I said, we've all been split. We've all been playing these distortions. We've all been playing these games. But as we go through the ego deaths and we're no longer scared of what we would lose, or hurting other people, it's okay. Sometimes you got to set boundaries. You got to take care of yourself. You got to contain your energy. As we start to do that, we change the playing field. We restructure the energy so that leaking can't happen. That's forcing the masculine energy to stop extracting, and again, it's part of the program. It's part of what's been overlain here, where that masculine energy is really good at making things happen. It's really good at being successful in the world. It's really good at organizing and planning and conquering and claiming and taking and all of that. And it's gotten away with it in this realm because that's the energy that this realm is made off of, right? And so it's taken the feminine energy to pull back and say, no more, you're not extracting from me. My blue jays are keep flying around, seeing them. Yeah, there's something with that too. The blue jays, I mentioned my kindred spirit that I read for and do sessions with, and she was having the blue jays as well, and she looked it up and she sent it to me. And so it was more about the as above so below, that hermetic principle that is connected to the 33rd ley line, which I realized is the ley line that I'm the closest to, and sometimes weaving in right directly on, depending on where I go. And also the Trinity, the third, which is everything that we're talking about, the one and the three, and the co-creation. This is all what came up in that last reading. So the blue jays started coming to me in her just within the last month. So it's again a representation of the Trinity and of the masculine and the feminine. That's another synchronicity that I wanted to talk about. Was that. So I'm glad I remembered it. The coming in again, representing that. So they come in pairs, the jays. So there's the feminine, the female, and the masculine, and the male is, he's bigger and he's loud and, he's protector and, he's just always, doing his thing. And the female, she's a little more delicate, her voice is more like it's more of like a cadence and a trill and like this, whereas his is like this, right? So watching the polarities, and they're not afraid at all. Like they come, I sit out there a lot, and they come every morning when I sit out there, and mostly him. She'll come a little bit, but she stays a little way off. She's a little more shy. And so I'm watching them and I'm watching their behaviors, but it's all about the polarities. And even what the animal totem thing that she sent me was talking about the black and white that they have on them, and the blue, and it was the as above and the below, and the anchoring the heaven onto the earth, and this same exact message and decode that I was getting on the grids with the 33rd parallel, the as above so below, but also into the Trinity, and the Trinity being the polarities, the masculine and the feminine, the third energy that's created that co-creation energy. So it's like the signs are everywhere. So to me, it's very obvious in conclusion that there's a rise and a return of the divine masculine energy, because the feminine energy within us, or within the female collective, has found that unity, that Trinity within herself, where she's not following, because that will happen when you feel rejected by an energy or a man or yourself. You try to do better. You get into this trying energy or this chasing energy, right? It kicks you into your masculine energy, kicks you into your unworthiness, where you don't feel worthy, and then you're trying to get it right, or then you can fall into your distortion energy where you're trying to seduce to bring them around because you want to, what can I do to like make you turn towards me? What we do to facilitate the turning towards the soul and the feminine is to turn towards it within ourselves, right? Somebody's got to start this thing, somebody's got to be brave enough to do it. I remember when my kids were little, like my daughter was probably like 5, maybe 4, I don't know. And they fought all the time. And my son would pick on her. He would spin out and, he got into a lot of aggressive energy because he got so lost. He got into this energy. He got separated from his, all these things. And so he would attack her, they would fight like fist fights, like she's on the ground with her legs kicking him, and it was horrible. And I remember this one time I said this to her, and I was just channeling, and I didn't even know I channeled at that point in life. And I felt really kind of guilty about it. I was like, God, what an asshole. But I said, Arame, you have to be the one to stop it. You have to be the stronger one. And she was like, that's not fair. But why do I have to be the stronger one? He's the one that starts it, and he shouldn't be doing it. And I said, because you can. He's not capable. Because you can. And because you can, you have to. You can't not just because he's not, and so, and it took her a long time, to do that, but eventually she did. And that's how we are too. It takes us a long time to do that. So whether you're a man or a woman, because a lot of, and that was my son as well, he has a lot of feminine in him as well, but he had cast it out. He had to turn back to it. He had to turn back to it amidst his catalyst of somebody who was telling him he didn't know what he thought, or didn't even know the right questions to ask, or, all these things, and he had to be like, no, I honor my process, and I honor my journey, and I honor my inner knowing. He claimed his self-worth, and now he's that fractal, and he's co-creating. And so he and I are a match in that way, because we've both done that. We both did that in relation to the same catalyst, the same perpetrator, but I always talk about that, the dark angels. And so when I had that situation with that woman, right before, I didn't go into that, but right before I was maybe I did, but right before I was about to start offering the distance sessions, and I was guided to do my video and all that, and I was having some of this stuff get kicked up, I had that catalyst of a woman that was really echoing that same pattern of kind of acting like she knew about my journey more than I did, when I was like, oh honey, you have not walked in my shoes. And like the thing that you're pathologizing is something that I had at least 5 trials, deep dark trials connected to, that brought me to the level of integration and way of maneuvering that you're viewing in a way through a projection, because he was in an active trigger as well. But it was perfect because it got me to claim myself, and it helped me to clear a shit ton of stuff and up level right as I was going through a huge expansion within myself. And so, a lot of that noticing that you'll have when you're on the threshold of really coming into union with yourself and really leaning into your and not to say that it's like done and gone, we do it in increments, we turn towards it a little more, and we get another level, we clear out some of the stuff that's in the way, and we have a more solid container, and then we might do another one later where it's like, something that we're in process with, right? But those beautiful divine catalysts that will come along right on time, in perfect divine timing. Again, you might be guided to do something that you don't normally do, and you might be guided to do it so that you can trigger somebody else, so that they can trigger you, so that you can, like whatever it is, whatever it is. And that's that coyote medicine, where just to listen to your guidance, even if it doesn't really make sense, it's like we're being guided, we're being guided into unraveling, this kind of stuff, so that we can hold greater and greater container for ourselves. And as we do that, we become a magnetic force that pulls and encourages and is part of that. I hope I'm making sense. It's all here, but it's like unpacking as I'm speaking. And so probably next reading I'll have more clarify. I always seem to clarify a little bit more because stuff is just coming through. as I'm talking. But anyway, it's like we're contributing to the unification of the polarities and the split, which goes back through all of galactic history and Earth history, back through the breeder programs and back through the fall of Atlantis and back through the massacre of in Lemuria, all these things, it's all connected to that. So when we're clearing these things, we're clearing on those levels as well. And that's a lot of the stuff that comes up in the sessions. The other thing that I wanted to say, if you are a man that feels, or a woman, of course, because a lot of the women that I'm working through are working on this stuff as well. But the men, I feel that there's something in the energy right now where there's just this huge opportunity. So if you are a man that's feeling this call and this magnetism towards your soul and towards holding a container for yourself in a way that you never have before, and you're having some of this like fear threshold stuff come up and you would like some support and assistance, please reach out. I would be honored to work with you. I feel like there's this huge momentum. I feel like I've always worked with the divine. I work with the polarities. I'm on the Heros Gamos journey. Unifying within. It's part of the Rose lineage. It's part of what I'm here to be doing. Part of my mission. And so I've been doing this, working with this all along, but I feel like right now there's a lot of energy for it. I'm being given a lot of indications that I'm kind of on the pulse with this. So please feel free to reach out if you would like that support. If you feel guided and drawn and you feel like you're on that level where you just kind of want to gather and commune. Also, in doing so, we would be working even more with a collective energy and assisting. I feel like that work that man and I did put energy into the collective that is assisting others, other men and women who are working on this within themselves, to make it a little bit easier. So it almost feels like, that's why I feel to say this, because I feel like every man that I get to work with where we clear some of this, some of it is really generational as well, like kind of like overlays, or we could call them implants or this type of thing through your lineage or through your galactic timeline. A lot of these things are being shown and coming off because of the energies that we're in right now. Again, where we're at in the cycle of the ages, where we're at in the solar cycle, where we're at in the photon belt, the information that's coming through, but something specific about right now. Okay, so just throwing that out there, reminding you that is available to you. Should it feel resonant? And contributing, and also a way to contribute to the further expansion and awakening and unification of humanity, because these sessions are definitely going collective. So collaborative work for you individually, but also for our brothers and the brothers within us, the masculine within all of us, for our feminine counterparts as well. And again, that feeling of safety, that real feeling of safety, and that I felt over the last week, through the energy and the container of the masculines who are turning towards themselves. So if that's you and you are doing that work quietly within yourself, it's felt and it's rippling out into the field. You're making it more exciting. You don't need, if you want support and you want to collaborate, I'm offering support in that way. But of course, we can do all of this within ourselves. So if you are somebody that's doing it within yourself, thank you for that fractal and that rippling, because again, as a feminine that's sensitive, that feels these things, I'm feeling this level in containment. I know it's a reflection of what I'm doing within myself that's rippling out and creating that fractal and that magnet and making it easier. All of us, all of the women who are doing this within themselves, and all of the men who are doing this within themselves, we're creating a new template and a new architecture that's like structured water. It's rippling out in the field. And for the men or the masculine aspects of ourselves that are struggling a little bit, there's a loud call right now, and you might try to turn around and go the other direction, but at another point you're gonna have to turn around and come back this way, right? And that there's just a momentum and a magnetism that's pulling this. It's okay if you're running. It's okay if you need to do that, because there's just alchemies or things that you are going to pull in to assist you, whether it's within yourself or just dark nights of the soul or a catalyst. A lot of men who run and are afraid of the feminine energy within them, they're afraid of it because it's so strong. They're afraid of it because they have that magician energy that really it scares them. It scares them because it's not what the other men are doing. And so and they can fear it. And then because of that, they fear it in women. They might be drawn to real divine feminine women, but they're afraid of it because in order to meet with, again, it's the Stargate, it's the frequency. In order to match that frequency, they have to match it within themselves, but they're afraid of that. Maybe they have trauma. Like me, I had trauma through religion where I thought my channel was the devil, so I was afraid of it, right? That kind of thing. The men, maybe, you know, that you were made fun of, or you were beat up, or you had to, like my son, he had to toughen up, you know, so that he wasn't like kind of just like shamed and stuff like that. You toughen up and you shield up, and you get separated from it, and you can't find it again. And then the people or women or whatever it is, opportunities, situations that remind you of that and connect you to that can scare you, because it indicates that ego death. And that ego was what was keeping you safe in those times when you had to run from this, right? And so to provide that safe container for yourself, but often those men will feel much safer with women in their darker energy, women that are manipulative, or women that gaslight, or women that leak their energy, and then when you try to call it out to them, they lie and they turn it around on you, and then you start going into cognitive dissonance. But that's all part of your sacred journey of going through that spiral and that alchemy, so that you can hold space for yourself, you know. So just like, you know, the women, we will attract to the narcissistic, it's the same thing, you know. It's the same thing. It's just the same thing for women or for men. You know, we attract in those people, those catalysts that get us to hold space for ourselves and to believe in ourselves. That brings us back with our polarities intact. We have our masculine energy, knowing our worth, honoring our psychic senses that tell us something about somebody that they're denying, but turns out you were right, you know, and just trusting yourself and reclaiming that, all of it being in service to bringing us back home. It's okay if you have these deep traumas, and you just can't get near it, and you got to run away. But if you would like some assistance, again, I'd be so honored and willing to assist and to help with that for the greatest good of all. But again, all of this we can do inside of ourselves, and just that reminder that if you are in this energy, just really hold space for yourself, hold space for the intuitive knowing part of yourself, even when nobody else would, you know, none of the men around you, none of the uncles, none of the fathers, none of the teachers, none of the, you know, finding those men or women that you do feel safe with, that you can you can help this one, knowing its worth, right? Knowing its worth. So let's see, I am at an hour, so I think I'm going to pull one closing message. I really hope that came through. I know often when I'm stumbling around and I'm like I just could not find the words, I could not get it out. When I listen, I'm like, no, it came through because the transmission's there. I am really in the current of this energy. I'm really feeling it. And so I'm trusting that the energy's there, even if my words were not, because often what will happen, and this will happen to me when somebody's talking, I'll start getting my own downloads, like just the frequency of what they're saying, even if they're not saying it well, activates me, and then I'll start having my own realizations. That's always my intention for these readings. I do talk a lot and I have a lot to say, but I stumble around as well. So the transmissions, the integration, the codes, let's see what this last... interesting. Dances on one foot balancing act. That is a bit of the energy right now. Yeah, there is a bit of topple energy in this, because there's such an invitation to come back home, but there's the 9, right? And the 9 is like, keep going. You know, it indicates that it's a little gnarly. It's a little crunchy. The 9s for me always feel like, okay, keep going. Why is the message keep going, persevere? Because you kind of want to give up. You kind of want to run away and give up. And so it's that balancing act of like tending to your nervous system when you're in this space, and pulling away if you need to, but then doing that inner alchemy and doing that self-care, that inner child work where you turn towards yourself and you validate yourself and you honor yourself and you care for yourself, just, you know, rather than, you know, running to the point where you start chasing things, or you get into that conquering energy, which is an addictive cycle that's just not going to work. It's not going to work in this energy. You're going to crash and burn. You know, maybe you need to crash and burn. That's okay. You'll crash and burn, and then you'll rise. You know, you'll find your worthiness after you get to the very bottom, but it doesn't have to be that way. You know, so it's just like kind of balancing, finding that center point where, you're wobbling, you're trying to find your steadiness. You might need to pull back your energy a little bit to find your steadiness, but don't let it tip you over into distortion. You know, you might interface with a catalyst, that's a reflection of that distortion in you, but let that be a catalyst. Always let it be a catalyst. I did do that reading about a month or two ago. I forget what I called it. I know there was something about Atlantean triggers in the title. And that one, if you want to dive into this kind of like energy where like going head on into the alchemy and not running or blaming or that kind of thing, I talk about it a lot in that reading because that's when I was in that trigger. That's when I was in one of these. So you might want to check that out if you want to go into that a little bit more. But yeah, just kind of like staying steady, staying neutral. That can happen even if you're around or in the middle of some people that are doing this. Maybe you're like kind of holding space for people that are catalyzing each other, and you're just meant to be that like neutral container. So there's a lot of that too. For those of us that kind of like are in a certain level of union with ourselves, like we're not currently in another alchemy or up leveling in it, we are kind of holding that neutral space in the field as other people are doing an up leveling. Okay, so a lot of energy and messaging around that there's a huge amount of magnetism and turning towards our worth, which is our feminine, our soul, our divinity, a little bit of a kickback in that, a little bit of a wobble around that, because it's a huge adjustment. Oh my God, I just remembered. Okay, I need to talk about this as well. The other thing the other way I've been decoding this is through the data centers. Okay, so talk about like this kind of conquering type of energy that just has no connection to the soul or the spirit, no connection to nature, no connection to how your actions affect anybody else, just this completely selfish, like inverted, like the far end of the spectrum of this energy, right? Where it's just conquering, right? Okay, so that going on, in our world, and quickly, and trying to take over real fast before nobody notices. Okay, it's a really unifying situation, and that's what I'm noticing. No matter what side of the fence you might be on in terms of the polarities, where everything's gotten fractured, right? So then there's this political perspective and this political spectrum. No matter which side you're on, and there's we're all in agreement that this is not a good idea, so everybody's coming together. There's an opportunity, maybe not everybody, some people aren't engaging with this, but a lot of people are, and it's very nonpartisan in a way, although people are making it that because they're having trouble dropping this division, but it's still bringing people together. So there's another indication of how the polarities are coming together. There's a common cause. There's a magnetism in the field, in the energy right now, which is pulling things together. It might look really bad. It might be a catalyst. It might be something, there has to be some sort of like outrage or anger or catalyst that gets people to say, no, I don't want this, and I'm going to do something different. I choose myself. I choose myself when we're talking about personal or even relational, or if we're talking about the earth and the world and what's going on, we're choosing the organic timeline. We're choosing that which is in the highest good of all, that which protects our water, that which protects beauty, which protects the land, which is all feminine. It's all feminine, soul-based, interconnected energy, right? It's not this, because our action-oriented needs to be considering the whole, right? Not just the ego gains, like these data centers, right? So very, very interesting. So I just feel like there are so many indicators of this unification of the masculine and feminine energy. But again, a lot of stuff being kicked up and being worked out, a lot of catalyzing, and that's okay. It needs to be that way. It's all sacred path. It's like me with that woman. I have so much love for her. Like we kind of went our separate ways, because ideally, like both people will kind of like tend to their triggers and like go through their stuff and then rebirth and come back, and you're on the same level and you're still co-creating together. But sometimes that doesn't happen. You need to just go in your separate corners and do it for yourself and then move on. Like that's the point of the interaction. That's the whole point, is to trigger and alchemize and that kind of thing. But anyway, even though we're not in contact anymore, I have so much gratitude because it was such an important thing for me. So a lot of that going on right now, honoring it all, honoring all the catalysts, and honoring the fear that's coming up in us. It needs to come up in order to be held and to be tended to. Again, the motion being tending to and holding yourself. And so that's what I was talking about in that reading that I mentioned, where I titled something about, I'll find out what it is, and I'll reference it in the description box or below. I'll just give the title. Okay. So, or I could post it in. Anyway, I'll figure that part out. But yeah, I was talking about that, like where instead of doing the alchemy, instead of going into it, we can get into the blame game where we're focusing on what the other person is doing and how that shouldn't be. And it's like, no, they're doing that because you called that in. Something in your field called it in because you needed this alchemy. You know, you needed this, and so not getting caught up in the blame game, right? But going towards that alchemy and allowing that to happen. So there is a little bit of a finesse and a balancing act, because when you were having triggers of this level, because again, the level of the core wound of humanity that I saw in that session with that man was really big, and it does take a bit of finesse and gentleness and self-care and holding to get to those wounds, to get to the levels that we're at right now. And so it's just being careful. And sometimes, again, if you are in one of these, you know, there might be somebody else assigned to hold space. You know, there might be a third person involved, or a group involved, or you know, an energetic mediator, or even a physical mediator in this, because these are big energies that we're dancing with, really big energies that we're dancing with, like huge. Because a lot of the people that are, again, I was talking about a lot of the people that are really afraid of their feminine energy, they're afraid of it because they have a lot of it. And so this goes back to another thing I wanted to say. Yeah, it's okay. It's longer reading, but I want to wait. Is because there's a lot, you have a lot of access, you know, your priestesses, your priests, your priestesses, and you've been killed, and you've, you know, maybe fallen into timelines of destruction. You've been on planets that have exploded, and you've sunk, and you've all these things, and it was all connected to your power, and you're afraid of it, right? So a lot of the people that really do a lot of this spiraling and running are absolutely huge souls, and are connected from the beginning of time. And so it's a lot that we're doing right now, because these magicians are being called back to life, or they're being breathed back to life, and just knowing your worth and dropping, because what's happening is the matrix in the 3D society is dropping, and what's rising in its place is the truth, and the truth is our access and our worth, our inherent worth, because of who we are. So this also relates to what I've been talking about in the sessions where there's this coning that's going on, where there are these clearings up above the head, and then this cone energy where there is all this indication of sort of limitless access through our psychic centers. So a lot is clicking on, and as that clicks on, this stuff gets kicked off. It just kind of dissolves, but we still have to play with it and in some way, interact with it in some way to clear it. So, and that's the other thing for a lot of you, the opening of your psychic centers might be happening very gradually, where you don't quite notice because it's happening very slowly. But if you think back, or you look back, you know, a year ago, or even a few months ago, you might realize, like, oh my gosh, like I am so much more psychic now than I used to be, you know, and I think a lot of us are noticing that, where you're like, wow, this information is really fast, or like, how did I know that, or that happened and then that happened. You know, there's a quickening to this. We are osmosing it, and we're in it, and we're in the flow of it, and so we're used to it. But to acknowledge that there's a huge expansion of the feminine energy in us, of our psychic energy, of our clairvoyant, our knowing, our visionary, our healing abilities, all of these things. Okay. And so this is happening within all of us. So all of the magicians and the priests and the priestesses and the unicorns and, you know, all these things in our realm, it's like ding, 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 ding. There's something going on. We're being asked to come back to ourselves, to come back to our worth. And again, a lot of the traumas that have to come up are very far back. And so it's a lot right now. It's a lot. So we are holding space for each other in the field. Again, putting our consciousness on this. We're identifying this through this reading, through this channel. May the transmissions reach you, activate you, clear you, help you understand what's going on, and how huge this is. And to just be gentle with yourself and others. The degree of alignment and balancing of the polarities coming in that's activating the divine masculine energy in all of us right now, because of the work that all of us have been doing in standing with ourselves, standing with our feminine energy within ourselves, standing with the earth, standing with the things that are true and real. It's all activating the divine masculine energy to continue to take action in this way. It's starting to reach the sleeping lions, in a way that's really palpable, that might be kicking up some fear. The light, it's interesting, the light just changed. I wonder how that will look in the reading in relation to what I'm saying. It's almost like things are getting really intimate, where it's like we're whispering now because every word that we say has an echo. It's like every action that we take has such an echo. There's so much reverberating through the field right now. Everything that we're doing has so much consequence. So again, the balancing act and really being aware of these triggers and aware of your darkness, unplugging it, because there's so much potential to make things right now. The correction, the restoration, the harmonization. It's a magical miracle time. Okay, so I'm going to end there. Really, really felt that. I hope you could feel it with me. So powerful. And we're creating this right now as we put our consciousness on it, speaking it out loud, feeling it within your heart, that internal yes, or the buzz in your cells, or the recognition, the feeling, the chills, whatever it is. We're anchoring this together. We're bringing this forward even more. Every single one of us that steps in this direction. Again, it's hard. These wounds, these implants, these overlays, these trapping systems, these things are really entrenched, and they're really hard, and they're really ouchy. So for those of you who have someone in your life that is really afraid and running, or if you are that person, have compassion for yourself, because this is what you're dealing with. You're dealing with Akashic and Earth history, things that are really woven through the genetics, woven through your cosmic connections, your galactic connections, woven on all these different levels. It's like that Eight of Swords energy where you're just kind of like this, right? But we're unraveling it, we're doing it, and it is a balancing act. It's like Jenga. You gotta be really careful, and yet we're doing it. So again, putting our attention on this, putting our care and our love and our space holding on this movement that's happening right now. So I so look forward to see what comes from this, what becomes clear next week. Next week, my son is going to be with me. He comes up to my home here, where he was when he was little, like once a month, once every 4 or 5, 6 weeks. So he's going to be here. So I won't be doing a reading next week. So yeah, a lot will happen, because he and I are going to be anchoring the energy that we've been working on down in the desert, up here in the town, in his birth town, and in the forests and in the rivers, and these kind of things. So it's going to be really, really big. I am doing stone placements with crystal placements with Alora Hazel through her crystal placement with the energies of Shasta, connected to the root chakra, the Stargate 1. It's not specifically Stargate 1 from what I've learned from Indigo Angel, but it's connected to it, connected to the root chakra energy. So a lot of this grid work going on too, and I'm going to be getting my stones this week. Probably do the first placement before I do the next reading. So there's going to be so much to talk about next week. It's so exciting. I feel like we're at this huge shifting point. So feel free to share if you want. If you want to share, if you feel to share any synchronicities that you might be having, or anything that you're feeling in relation to this energy, you're welcome to share in a private message. If you don't want to share in the comments, I'm just curious, and again, it like anchors energy and builds momentum in community, and helps to bring things into awareness. Also, I always love to know who's watching and who's resonating with these readings. There's quite a few people that are watching, but there's only a handful, or a couple, like 20, 30 people that will let me know. And so I'm just always curious when somebody new does, or somebody in town tells me they're watching. I'm like, oh my gosh, because it's just nice to know who you're vibing with and who you're co-creating in these realms. So no pressure, but I always just letting you know. I always love to see, if you feel to add your name and your just knowing who's in this room with me. So anyway, thank you for being here and for listening. I'm going to go back. I really hope that I made sense. I feel like I could have done this video so much better, but that's okay. That's part of this, and I'm just going to let it go and love myself. Ending with that. Okay, much love, and I'll see you next time if I do. Thank you. Bye.